In June of 1962, 3 men disappeared from a prison that was never supposed to lose anyone. By morning, their cells inside Alcatraz were empty. In their beds lay crude papier-mâché heads, painted and positioned beneath prison blankets. Outside the walls, the cold waters of San Francisco Bay moved in silence. The official conclusion would later state that no one ever escaped Alcatraz alive, and yet those 3 men were never found. What happened that night was not just an escape attempt. It was a direct challenge to the most psychologically powerful prison in American history. Alcatraz was not merely a building of steel and concrete. It was an idea, an engineered myth of inevitability. Escape was not supposed to be difficult. It was supposed to be impossible. More than 60 years later, the mystery remains unsettled, not because of romance or legend, but because the science of the bay, the timing of the tides, and the calculated ingenuity of the prisoners suggests something far more complex than a simple drowning. To understand what truly happened, we must dismantle the illusion of Alcatraz itself. Alcatraz did not rely on walls alone. Located 1.25 miles from the shore of San Francisco, the island sat in waters averaging 50 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia could begin within minutes. The currents were unpredictable, shifting with tidal cycles that could reach speeds exceeding 6 knots. Beneath the surface, submerged rock formations and churning undertows created natural hazards more dangerous than any guard tower. The United States government understood this geography well. When the federal penitentiary opened in 1934, it was marketed as the ultimate solution for incorrigible inmates, men who had failed in other prisons. Among them were figures like Al Capone and George "Machine Gun" Kelly. Their presence helped solidify the prison's reputation. Alcatraz was not built to rehabilitate. It was built to isolate, intimidate, and deter. Yet the statistics complicate the myth. Between 1934 and 1963, there were 14 recorded escape attempts involving 36 men. Most were caught, some were shot, 5 were officially listed as drowned. But in several cases, bodies were never recovered. The phrase, "no one ever escaped," was less a proven fact and more a reinforced narrative. The central contradiction emerges here. Was Alcatraz truly escape-proof because of its design, or because the surrounding environment created a psychological barrier so strong that failure was assumed before any body could be found? The prison itself was structurally formidable, but not invulnerable. The main cell house, built originally as a military prison, was old even by 1930 standards. Ventilation ducts, plumbing chases, and service corridors ran through its interior. The walls were reinforced concrete, but erosion from salty air had weakened portions over decades. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin understood this. Using stolen spoons and a makeshift drill constructed from a vacuum motor, they widened the ventilation openings behind their sinks. Night after night, they chipped away at deteriorating concrete, concealing debris in their pant legs and scattering it in the yard. The ingenuity was mechanical, but it was also psychological. They studied guard routines, they timed head counts, they constructed dummy heads from soap, toothpaste, and toilet paper. Human hair from the barbershop completed the illusion. For months, the system never noticed. This was not recklessness. It was structured experimentation, and it exposed a weakness in Alcatraz that had little to do with walls: predictability. But even if they reached the roof undetected, the greater challenge remained: the bay itself. San Francisco Bay operates on a tidal exchange system linked directly to the Pacific Ocean. Twice daily, vast volumes of water surge through the Golden Gate. During ebb tide, currents flow outward toward open sea. During flood tide, they push inward toward the bay's interior. On the night of June 11, 1962, Tidal charts indicate a slack tide around 11:30 p.m., followed by a northward current toward Marin headlands rather than out into the Pacific. This detail becomes critical. A mistimed departure could have swept the men into the ocean within minutes, but a precisely timed launch might have carried them toward calmer shores. Water temperature alone does not guarantee death. Cold shock response typically peaks in the first minutes of immersion. After that, survival depends on insulation, flotation, and energy conservation. The Englands were raised in Florida, accustomed to swimming. They constructed a raft from over 50 stolen raincoats, heat-sealed with steam pipes to create buoyancy. The question is no longer whether the water was dangerous. It was. The question becomes whether there existed a narrow survival corridor within those dangers, a specific tidal window that transformed the impossible into the improbable. And that possibility shifts the narrative. Alcatraz was not the first prison to rely on natural geography as a barrier. Throughout history, isolated islands have served as detention sites precisely because water amplifies confinement. The British used remote islands for penal colonies. The French sent prisoners to Devil's Island. Nature becomes the guard. But natural systems are not static walls. They are dynamic forces. Tides shift, weather changes, patterns repeat, but never identically. When a prison relies on nature as its primary defense, it also inherits nature's variability. In this broader context, the 1962 escape becomes less a singular anomaly and more a test case. What happens when human planning intersects with environmental fluctuation? When does deterrence transform into overconfidence? The reputation of Alcatraz depended on certainty, yet certainty in a tidal system is an illusion. The escape began in silence. At approximately 11:30 p.m., Morris and the Englands exited their cells through the widened vents. Alan West, the fourth conspirator, failed to remove his vent grill in time and was left behind. This detail matters. It suggests the plan was constrained by timing, not spontaneity. The men climbed to the utility corridor above the cell house, then through a kitchen vent to the roof. Guards in the towers reported nothing unusual. Fog had rolled in, reducing visibility. The prison's design assumed that darkness combined with isolation would discourage movement. Instead, it concealed it. Sliding down a kitchen pipe to the northeast shoreline, they inflated their raft. According to reconstructed timelines, they likely launched between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. The tide had begun to shift. The current would not immediately drag them westward into the Pacific. In the days that followed, fragments of raincoat material were found near Angel Island. A homemade paddle surfaced. Months later, a portion of a life vest washed ashore. These artifacts neither confirm survival nor guarantee drowning. They indicate passage. The FBI investigated for 17 years. Officially, the case closed in 1979, concluding that the men likely drowned. Yet in 2013, a letter surfaced, allegedly from one of the escapees, claiming survival. Forensic analysis could not conclusively authenticate it. The uncertainty persisted. This reconstruction reveals something deeper. The escape was not chaotic. It was engineered around environmental timing. That alone challenges the prison's myth. To evaluate survival probability, modern researchers conducted computer simulations using tidal data from 1962. These models tested departure times at 15-minute intervals. Results showed that a launch between 11:30 p.m. and midnight could have carried a raft toward Horseshoe Bay or Marin headlands within an hour. If they departed earlier, the ebb tide might have swept them toward the Golden Gate Bridge and out to sea. If later, the flood tide would push them deeper into the bay. Survival hinged on less than a 30-minute window. Cold water survival charts indicate that in 50-degree water, Unconsciousness may occur within 1 to 2 hours, but flotation devices significantly extend endurance. A sealed raincoat raft would reduce immersion, limiting heat loss. Wave energy in the bay is also influenced by wind conditions. Historical weather data shows relatively calm winds that night. This reduces surface chop and improves raft stability. When layered together, tidal timing, flotation, weather, the scenario shifts from near zero probability to low but plausible survivability. Not certainty, plausibility. And plausibility erodes myth more effectively than proof. The power of Alcatraz lay not only in steel bars, but in collective belief. The phrase escape-proof functioned as a psychological perimeter extending beyond the island itself. If inmates believed escape meant certain death, fewer would attempt it. If the public believed no one could flee, the prison symbolized absolute authority. But authority built on perception is vulnerable to anomaly. The 1962 escape destabilized the narrative. Even without confirmed survival, the fact that bodies were never recovered introduced doubt. Geography as prison works only when unpredictability is assumed to favor the jailer. Yet nature does not take sides. Tides are indifferent. They may drown or deliver. This has implications beyond Alcatraz. Throughout history, systems that rely on environmental barriers, oceans, deserts, mountains, eventually confront individuals who study those systems deeply enough to exploit their margins. The Anglos and Moors did not overpower Alcatraz. They may have navigated its blind spot. At dawn on June 12th, guards discovered empty cells and motionless papier-mâché faces. Sirens echoed across the bay. Search boats cut through the water. Helicopters scanned the surface. Nothing definitive emerged. Officially, no one escaped Alcatraz alive, yet no conclusive evidence proved the opposite. The island's reputation remained intact, but with a fracture running through its foundation. Today, visitors walk through the abandoned cell house of Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. The paint peels, the corridors echo, the water still moves beyond the rocks. It looks serene from the shore, but beneath that surface lies a system of currents that once determined whether 3 men vanished or survived. Alcatraz was designed to be an answer, a final containment. Instead, it became a question, not whether escape was attempted, but whether the boundary between impossibility and improbability is thinner than we are willing to admit. And somewhere in the shifting tides of San Francisco Bay, that question still moves.